Hi, Alan, and hi, Karen. Thank you very much for joining me today. And just this is episode 8, and this is a great milestone for us because we're actually expanding our participants. And Karen is going to be the first guest that we have on a little interesting chats with about coaching. Karen, I'll leave it over to you to introduce yourself a little bit and give us a little bit of background, and then we'll jump straight into our subject of the day, and we'll take it from there. Karen.
Thank you so much, CD, and hi to Alan. I have been in corporate training for over 30 years, so a training and development manager in a corporate in South Africa, and have been involved with coaching since the early 2000s. So was trained in 2004 and then have been involved with coaching and obviously coaching the organization and how that impacts on talent management and development, etc. So absolutely passionate about working in a corporate. I love the role. I love the numbers that I can work with in a corporate because they're large and you make a huge impact and you can track that impact. So really important for me, but also passionate about coaching and the skills that it brings into the environment.
Thank you, Karen, and welcome. And you led us straight into the subject of the day, and you've basically summarized exactly what we want to talk about in a way. So today our chat is about exactly that. So coaching in a corporate environment, the impact of it, not only on the people development side, but on the soft skills and the hard skills, in a sense, and as our theme around this podcast is really to educate people on the impacts of coaching. We've spoken a lot about the individual changes that people go through and what the process looks like, and the mindfulness and so on. So let's start with the why of really why it is important to create a coaching culture within an organization, and I'll let you start and let Alan jump in as well afterwards, and we can take it from there. And
great question. Yeah.
Pleasure.
So, for me, there's two things about coaching in a corporate. Okay, so I want to use first of all the noun of coaching, very often with a capital C. So I am a coach, and therefore I'm providing that service in an organization. But the second part of coaching in organizations is the management and leadership skill of the verb of coaching. So I really want us to maybe cover both today, because when you ask me why is it important, when we look at, I'm a coach and I'm offering a service of being a coach in a corporate, you're looking at specific people that have that opportunity. So if I am coaching a specific identified people, and I think the biggest myth that we have is very often when people are identified for coaching in an organization, a lot of people think that it's to improve performance, there's something wrong. But in actual fact, most coaching that is used in organizations is to take people with high potential, our talent, and give them the opportunity to be coached, because it is time that is required. And so it's not something that you blanket for everybody. It's about identifying those people with that potential that a coach is going to release for them, and that they're going to really raise the bar of their performance. So for me, coaching isn't about, sort of a performance management process. What coaching is about raising the bar of the person in the environment who actually gets the opportunity to be coached.
That's right.
That is, yeah. Karen, I think that you raise such a significant point here, because you have to split those into different topics. Performance is performance. Coaching for people for upward mobility, if I can put it that way, is a completely different thing. And I mean, this is also very much a novel approach in organizations. Not everybody's doing it. So I've been involved with a couple of companies that have, and I know that you at the organization in which you work for have done some groundbreaking work. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I think that, again, it's, and as I'm talking, I said there's two areas, and your one area is, your individual one-on-one coaching, which creates this release of this potential and raising the bar. But the other one I didn't introduce earlier that I'm thinking about now is team coaching, and the impact that team coaching can have on organizations and culture, where, pulling teams together to have a common purpose and common goals is very powerful for a coach to be able to do. And we've used that very successfully in terms of building culture through teams. So, that adds another element. And again, all what we're doing with coaching is we're constantly raising the bar of performance. So if you've got, a high-performing team, how do you pull them together with a common purpose and build on that energy and potential that you've got in the team in the same way that we would do it with individuals? And then that third leg, which is giving management the skill to coach. So they don't become a coach, but they can coach. And I do think that's where, as organizations, you can make the biggest impact. Because when you've expanded the base, you don't have one or two coaches, so everybody wants their time, and they're making an impact on the numbers that they can work with. As soon as you expand this to make it part of your culture, so you have a coaching culture, and it becomes part of a leadership toolkit. I think that is really where in corporates you start seeing the results, because suddenly the manager starts unleashing the potential of his teams. Now that is power in an organization.
I would agree with that.
So what comes up for me there is really from the individual coaching point of view and the team coaching point of view, and then the coaching as managers, the biggest impact, even with individual coaching, is the ripple effect that goes out to other people. Because from a coaching concept, you got to remember that the person that is coached is a specialist in what they do, right? Whether it is in finance, whether it is in sales, whether it is in marketing, all those different areas. And having that person coached and having that person perform, become more mindful and really connect what is best for them to what they do, then has a ripple effect not only in the business but also with the teams around them, and the way they lead and the way they make decisions and the way that they do things on a day-to-day thing. And if you've got the right coaches, that person's balance is also a lot better. Happier people. From a team coaching point of view, and this is something I personally used quite often in projects that I was involved in terms of opening businesses, in terms of rebranding outlets, in terms of reaching points where we've had big events and so on, is that being able to tap into people's common purpose and having them work towards in an open, balanced sort of everybody's got a seat at the table kind of way, where they're contributing towards their strengths, makes that process a lot stronger from the smallest detail in the back all the way to the execution. Then becomes a very involved process, because everybody specializes in their different areas. That then in turn with the coaching skills that they developed, and even within people being in that environment where that is the norm, and connecting that with the skills, that it just like I said, the ripple effect just continues all the way down to the staff. And the first place I actually worked at where this coaching culture was established was the most I'd say it was the most balanced, non-hierarchical, if that's the right word, sort of environment that we had, where everybody basically had a seat at the table and everybody had input, because you were taught to listen without any judgment. You were taught to listen without any agenda, and that allowed people to really come to the table and actually be that solution, because you've got to have faith in what people can contribute, and you've got to have faith in what people can do. And creating that coaching culture brings exactly that out, and it's the ultimate form of empowerment for me when it comes to that.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Can I continue this conversation by asking Karen to share with us something that I'm curious about, and that is that Karen, I know that you didn't reserve it to a certain band within the organization. You did target a lot of people who were more your frontline managers and even general managers, but you even went above that. So in a sense, getting directors, operational directors to go through the training themselves. How did that impact upon building, an appropriate culture that supports what CD is saying? Because I think that's the most important thing here, is that it needs to be fully inclusive. And a lot of people are not brave enough to actually go to that place. How was that for you?
Yeah, sort of reflecting as you said, it's amazing that we had that buy-in and that people wanted to do it. So I think that what happens, and I remember one manager saying to me that when he'd learned coaching, that he found it addictive, right? And I think it does become addictive because you see the results. So it just one thing that CD spoke about earlier was, inclusivity. Right, and that's what you're talking about as well, Alan, this entire inclusivity. So in the organization, we have trained directors and we've also trained supervisors. So we have given that skill right from your director level across. And, it builds people's confidence to manage, because suddenly they don't have to be the expert and the know-it-all for everything. So suddenly there's this inclusivity. And I think that diversity and inclusion is a massive topic at the moment.
Yes.
And for me, inclusion is a voice at the table.
Yes.
It's all very well to have a seat at the table, diversity, but inclusion is that voice at the table.
Voice,
yeah, and I do think that when leaders are coaching, they're giving people a voice. And therefore, you are including people by using your coaching skills, because you want to know what they know and you want to know their potential and what they can do. So, being able to offer it and to get the buy-in and for people to willingly come along and be trained, I think was a huge win. And then they themselves were able to add it to their toolkit, but to start to understand how to use the potential of their people. And that becomes that multiplying effect. When you're really using everybody around you, everybody's potential. And I mean, I've had managers who've said they've put people through formal development programs at business schools. And then part of that talent management program would have been a coaching course of whatever level. And they've just come back and said that's all they needed. That's where they saw the behavior change happen. When people are empowered to coach, they're empowering others. But it's a wonderful leadership skill to give people. And many people who are older will say to me that they wish they'd had it sooner. But, timing is everything as well. And you want people to be in the space to accept it, because not everyone does. Not everyone does. But the percentage of people that I've had go through the training that have not accepted it is probably lower than I've ever had on any program I've ever run in terms of acceptance. So, for me, I think that if you want to have a coaching culture, which is really a good conversation culture, that's what coaching is. It's about having great conversations that create new ideas and build on ideas and just release people's potential. I think that you have to balance it between having these internal coaches who have to have credibility. They have to be allowed to keep those conversations completely confidential. I think those are two really important things about having internal coaches. But you have to also, if you really want to expand a coaching culture internally, you have to equip managers to have the skill of coaching. And then you've got the internal coaches, which do the more formal processes for those specific identified people. And in my opinion, I think if you only have internal coaches, it's not bulked up enough. One has to have those internal coaches with that skill that managers can use as an incredibly high level leadership skill that really takes the culture where you want it to go.
Interesting.
So sorry, and I just want to.
No, carry on, CD. I have one more question, but
Yeah.
you go ahead.
No, I'm just going to add to what Karen said. That's one of the big things, and I think you touched on it there of what happens when you create a coaching culture. It shifts from this element of fear of what you mentioned at the beginning, that it's a performance management kind of thing, that's almost one of the boxes that's created for it, to it is actually the ultimate level of empowerment. And again, that ripple effect that I speak about of where people see the change people go through by being coached, and then they see the change of how they feel by the change of the different way that this person with the coaching skills manages them. That's really the ultimate form of understanding, and that's where the fear is almost taken away of that. I only have a coach in my organization, and only the naughty kids go sit in the coach's corner, right? So I think that in itself is a massive achievement, and well done for that. And having been part of so many of these environments, and having used those skills even outside of those environments, makes a big difference, because the best way to understand it is to actually experience it, and that's what changes, right?
Yeah. Great point. Just a quick one, Karen, on I want to just revert to strategy, and it's just simply because sometimes learning and development and those elements are not included within the ambit of what organizations see as valuable. But if you take Michael Porter's model of strategy, where he talks about exogenous factors that really influence organizations as part of the whole strategic deal. And obviously the big one that we've just experienced, obviously a pandemic, which is a great impact on organizations. Now, I know that both you and CD come from hospitality, and therefore you have really borne the brunt of it in different ways. So our question here is that, since that probably the strategy that you took to do what you were going to do, to change the organization in a sense around the way that you do things from a coaching perspective, but really a higher engagement of people in general. How has it impacted on you now that you are in the situation where the pandemic has made so many so many different challenges that you've had to actually face, everything, retrenchments, the whole lot. How has that strategy played out in terms of you being able to continue with your development of people within this terrible situation that we face?
Yeah, and so, through a coaching culture, you have an engagement culture. And I think that, that helps tremendously when you have equipped managers to have those quality conversations and be engaging. And especially in the hospitality industry, because you need people to be engaged. And so, it's about keeping managers engaged in the conversations that need to happen, and into going back to those skills. But so I'm just sort of thinking as I'm speaking. So of course, one of the challenges is that under threat, when we stress, we're going to revert back to norm. And so that has been one of the challenges, is that now that people are, and I'm talking people by the managers and supervisors and the leaders of the organization, one goes back to your previous behaviors when you're under threat. And so the new learned behavior maybe takes a back seat.
Okay.
And so, it's about keeping those topics top of mind and reminding people about the skills that they've learned that had great success. And so how do they bring them back into that? And I think that part of having this coaching culture, which is an engaged culture, is that people are then willing to come back and learn. And in our own organization, even though we've had so many people furloughed, we are running webinars every single week, and our numbers are high. because people are wanting to engage with the learning. So I think that you build a foundation, not only of a coaching culture, but of an engaged culture. And when people are engaged, they're prepared to come back and say, yes, we know that this is tough and this is a tough time, but they want to learn. And I think if you can, for me, a coaching culture is also learning culture. And, if you want to be a learning organization, you can't do it without having a coaching culture. So the spinner for us has been that people will still want to learn, even though times are tough. And I think that's what helps you to keep it going and to build on the foundations that you've laid.
Yeah,
I think
very
I'm going to come in there again. I'm going to come in from a point of view of the comparison between what might have happened without that level of engagement. I think in a lot of businesses, not only hospitality, and I think in a lot of businesses that have been impacted where these furlough moves or these retrenchment moves or some of these moves have been made, very often the situation has been that those decisions have been made in a very unengaged manner, where a very small group of people have basically shut themselves in a room and gone through that process of making that decision. Then by the time it reaches the group of people that it directly affects, that level of engagement was never there. And I think a lot of organizations you can see it now. It's already happening in the US, in the UK, and a lot of these places where people are now opening up, but they can't find anybody to come and work for them, exactly for that reason, because it was a one-sided decision, and the people feel that any level of trust or any level of engagement they might have had has now been taken away. So there's that kind of, without it, I feel that happened in a lot of places, and there's going to be a lot of artwork. In terms of what the future holds in that engagement, I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to be engaged in creating a coaching culture, because I think what people have realized during this time, with the time spent at home, with the times with their families, with the time with the big shift that was out of everybody's control, is that people are going to have to take a more complete approach to leadership and management and taking care of their staff than they have in the past, because it's not going to only be about your development at work and your salary anymore. It's going to be how are you going to look after me as a more complete person, and how are you going to allow me to develop outside of my work environment, because it's not only about the job anymore. It's now about that wider thing. And that's where coaching is different slightly, because as a neuroscience-based coach myself, you have to work on a space that's both personal and career or business orientated, because you can't sort out one space and have disbalance or unhappiness in another space. So that's very important for people to realize, is that's what coaching brings to the table, is that level of engagement where people can become more complete persons, and have a more complete way of thinking about things, versus what almost traditionally is almost that management kind of work is work, life is life. I have to put everything in there. 90% of my life goes into my work, 10% is outside of that, and that's the way the world works. And there's been a fundamental shift with that right now, and I think if people are not engaged in that opportunity, they're going to miss. They're going to almost fall behind in a way of what the future is going to look like for people. And it's very important for people to realize that, and coaching brings that to the table.
Yeah, and I think we have to realize it doesn't matter what your culture was before this happened. People are hurting. They are hurting in many ways. There's a sense of, for I think all of us, a sense of loss. It might be loss of colleagues, as you mentioned, loss of business, loss of income, loss of literally family and friends, a loss of lifestyle, loss of routine. So, people are really hurting on the one side. And I think that coaching can really help us to support people to work through some of that. and be able to work through it. But I don't, we mustn't underestimate that, and the value that where coaching can add to that. And also, it's about now that we need people's full potential, because we need people to be more flexible. We need them to be more multi-skilled. And I think coaching comes in to say, how do we bring out the best of our people right now? So that, first of all, we can help them through that personal journey of loss, of pain, of finding a new way of being. And on the other side, we can really use the potential that we've got that we've probably never tapped into before. Maybe we were siloed and you sat in your little box or whatever. And that isn't the way of the world going forward. It's going to be about multitasking, multi-ability, and we need to tap into that. And what better way, first of all, to help people to, get through a crisis, number one, with coaching, and number two, to be able to release their potential to use it across this much broader framework in the work environment. And I think that management levels will flatten as well. So we really need people to be able to manage themselves. And that means they've got to use their potential, and they've got to be able to be empowered, was a word you used earlier. So when you take all of that together, you look and you go, how can we not value coaching? It ticks all of those boxes, but there's a big job to do.
Yeah. So, Karen, I from what both of you and CD have said now, that is so important to recognize, because it's those elements that we really need to sort of unpack and understand it. And I think not all organizations are doing this kind of thing. I know a lot of organizations that are doing exactly the opposite. So, I think that there is a need for people to listen more about how they can do the things that they ought to. And one of the things, the biggest word apparently that has come up in the pandemic kind of discussions, and how we are labeled as a human race, is that we've been languishing. That word languishing has been the key word in this pandemic, which means that we basically immobilized, totally immobilized, which what we're hearing from you is that there's a lot of other stuff that going on that actually is moving away from that in terms of your experience within your organization. So I have a final question. And what tip would you give to an organization who wishes to perhaps embrace, they've never maybe done this before, or they might see this little discussion that we're having and think, maybe this is something for my company. What is the one thing that you think would be useful to somebody who is considering a coaching culture?
So I think that it's that strategy that you said. So, first having a really good strategy that says, are we all bought into this? What is that outcome that we're really looking for? And then to consider the different things that we've spoken about. You've got these different elements. The one element of having coaches to really unleash the talent of your current leadership as well as future leadership. So I think that's really important to look at. But don't rely only on those coaches. You really need to look at how do you equip your managers to be able to add coaching as the verb of coaching into their toolkit. To me, that's really important. I don't believe you can build a coaching culture one without the other. You need both of them. They support each other. And that is how you'll get also some momentum into the environment. So, I just think that you can't have organizations today that are not including coaching as a skill. It's a vital skill for leadership. If we want to move forward and use the potential of our people and be inclusive, which is a massive thing, inclusion, and especially we look at, the United States, inclusion is massive. It's the topic of the day. And I think that, the quick fix to inclusion is coaching, because it's a very inclusive process. So, but train people properly. It's not a quick fix. It's not a 1 hour webinar and whoop, we coaches. Make sure that your coaches are properly trained, that they have credibility to be coaches, and then make sure that when you train your managers, you skill them properly that they're confident to do this, because it's a huge change. We go from, as leaders, being the expert and the know-it-all, and suddenly we need to build that base around us. We need to coach often. We need to also step back and allow other people, we need to let go. And so it's a massive learning for managers. Don't do a quick fix. Do it properly, train people properly, and use proper qualified coaches. That would be my best advice to corporates.
Yeah, I don't think I can add anything else to that except for the fact. Okay, so first of all, hire a coach yourself. I mean, it's probably the like I said, this is the best understanding you can develop. But the starting point for me really is, and it's both from working in the coaching business myself, building a coaching business, and also what I've seen in organizations, is the starting point for me is understand what it is. And understand what it means, and understand how far, and refer to your International Coaching Federation standards, and refer to all those code of ethics and so on, and make sure that you have the knowledge for that. Because if you don't understand that, your coaching culture is going to become what we deal with from a day-to-day basis. I had a conversation with the president of a country's ICF chapter the other day, and they did a study where they had 60,000 people that call themselves coaches in the country. Out of that 60,000 people, only 4,000 people actually went through a course, and out of that 4,000 people, only 700 people actually did the ICF accredited courses and are actually ICF accredited coaches. So there's a big gap in what coaching actually is, and what the process is. And if you don't, there is a risk that if you don't do it properly, like Karen says, that you will end up with something in between that is going to force you to almost disconnect with the process and lose that opportunity. So it is important to do that work in the beginning, to understand, and like we do in coaching, creating awareness of what your current reality is and where you want to be. So just that apart from what Karen said, that to me is one of the big things. But thanks. This is a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great.
Yeah. Yes. So just we need to wrap this up and make sure that that everybody can get back to their day jobs. Karen, thank you very much for your time. Allan, thank you very much for taking the lead on the questions and so on. You asked great questions as always, and you've used all your coaching skills that you could possibly add today. If anybody is watching this, and we're all on LinkedIn, reach out to us. If you want to continue the discussion around coaching and what it means to you, and if there's any questions you might ask, we're always only a Zoom call or a conversation away. Our mission with this conversation is to make sure that people have an understanding of what it actually means to be a coach, to have a coaching culture, and to have coaching in your life. So I think we've achieved that quite a bit today. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you for moderating for us. Really cool. Thank you, CD. It's been brilliant.
Yeah.